Thank you, Dean. That was a lot of bio on me. I apologise for that. I was feeling very self-conscious as we went through that.
Good.
So let's move it away from me. So there's been a lot of conversation at this conference about the evolving nature of marketing, and to keep it super macro, this notion of how data, analytical thinking is combining with creative thinking, the left and right brain combination. And what I've been observing, and we at the Hall have been observing, is it's an interesting dynamic, particularly from a leadership perspective, and it creates a challenge that us as leaders of different types of organisations and different roles have to address. If we're going to succeed, we need to be bringing these different disciplines together, these very broad skill sets and different types of personality, and corralling and motivating them to get the right outcomes. And that really was the genesis of this session today. And thank you guys for joining us. We've very deliberately chosen a cross-section. We've got Carolyn representing client side, Ben creative, John media agency, and Annie who actually heads up HR at Google. And I'm going to actually hand over to you guys now. If you could introduce yourselves and your perspective on this panel would be great.
Sure. So my name is Annie Tampling, and I look after HR for Google Australia and New Zealand. And I think it's I'm super excited to be on the panel. I'm not in marketing, I am in HR, so I think the perspective I can bring for this audience is how we think about bringing together teams and looking at those different thinking types and personalities, and actually how we make sure we're creating inclusive cultures and inclusive teams. I work with the leaders of the business a lot and support them on their leadership journey and support them in sort of bringing together their team, so can definitely help bring some of that perspective today.
Cool. My name's John Preston. I'm the CEO of Blue 449. Prior to that, it was called Match Media, and it was an independent. And in that time, as a CEO, you could pretty much tell all your staff what to do. But now I've actually got a boss, and I haven't had one for 14 years, so I'm grappling with that scenario. But what's the difference that's happened in the agencies that's grown and evolved is that we now have about 8 different specialised services with all very different, unique characters coming from different places. And I think what I'd like to bring is perspective on a fast-growing mid-sized company that's also got a huge amount of diversity going on with it, and how you kind of meld all of that and make it work.
Very good. My turn.
Your turn.
Hi everyone. Thanks for having me, Jules. My name's Ben Bilball, and I work at a company called Karmarama. We started off as an ad agency and have evolved over the years, adding in a data capability and a digital development capability. And I think that our perspective is we've always been a kind of culture-first offer. Which kind of sounds obvious today, but most agencies talk about the work and not a lot else. We've always said that we stand or fall by the talent that we can attract and retain, and that's as much about creating the right culture for different types of people as it is about the work that we produce. And we've kind of learned through the hard way, I guess, of trying to combine those different left brain and right brain capabilities. We've tried merging them together, we've tried keeping them entirely separate, and the piece that seems to be working for us at the moment is a kind of connected specialism, if you like. So some shared cultural values, but also a recognition that different people do different things really well. And you have to nurture that, and you have to acknowledge that they want to do it with other like-minded people. And we've managed to kind of reduce it down to kind of 3 specialisms, I suppose, in terms of creative, analytic, and digital development. And that seems to be a model that's really working now, that we're really excited by. So culture first, but recognizing that monoculture is probably not the way to go, that having a culture of cultures, if you like, seems to bring in the best people and retain the best.
Hello, my name is Carolyn Bendwell. I am the Head of Marketing for ANZ here in Australia, and I think most of you would know ANZ, one of Australia's largest businesses and obviously one of the big 4 in terms of banking and finance. At ANZ, we have a fully centralised marketing model. So me and my team look after the provision of marketing strategy, support and execution for all of our key customer segments, product lines, across commercial and the consumer businesses, and our go-to-market functions, everything from social media, sponsorship, advertising, you name it. In terms of, and I guess why I sort of set it up like that, same thing, a lot of different skill sets. When you look at the change that's been going on in marketing, particularly over the last 5 or so years, it's been a massive change. And on the people perspective, I think that the two things that have kept me awake always and always on my mind is leading that change and developing a team that is match fit for that change, and talent, and how you acquire and nurture that talent, because it is really hard to get that right mix of people in and keep them.
Thanks, guys. So I remember some work we did at the hallway a few years back, and we were working with, it was a team development session, and we were told, you need to be aware that every single one of us is on multiple teams. You've got the team that might be your direct reports, you might be on a client agency team, you might be on a media publisher team. We're all on multiple teams. And I think hold that thought as we go through this, because different teams have different dynamics, but they all need to be working to best effect. Now, there's been a lot of research into this, into team structure and team development, and some of it focuses on process, and some talks more to the importance of culture and attitude. But Annie, starting with you, I'd love to hear in your experience, in the world of Google, what have you guys found are the key ingredients for building an effective team?
Sure. It's something actually Google's done quite a lot of research into, something that was of quite a lot of interest to us. So we actually did a longitudinal study on what makes an effective team, and that was done over 2 years. We studied over 200 teams. It looked at over 200 ways of evaluating team effectiveness, and that research found 5 key dynamics of an effective team. The first of those, which is the most fundamental, is psychological safety. And that's the sense that people feel comfortable to speak up and share their opinions, and that their opinions feel valued and heard. The second is around dependability. So how much people feel they can rely on each other to meet deadlines, to produce quality work. The third was around structure and clarity, and that is having clear roles, clear plan, clear goals, and understanding of what each other's doing and the vision for the team. The fourth is around meaning. So how much the work is personally important to a team member, and that sense of that purpose for being in the team. And the fifth was around impact. So what work you're doing, how much that matters and how much it's creating change. And what was interesting was these 5 key functions of an effective team were found consistent across all functions. So whether you're in engineering, whether you're in sales, whether you're in marketing, what geography you're in. So if you're in San Francisco or Sydney or Tokyo, they were consistent. And what was interesting as well, I think, which was what wasn't found, which was the number of top performers that were on a team. So I think generally that concept, you just put a whole lot of good top performers on a team and it works really well. So that wasn't there. Whether decisions were made by consensus, whether workloads were manageable, and whether the team was co-located. So I think it's a really interesting piece of research that's really helped us, and we have a lot of, we've now got a diagnostic that we use internally, and we've got a lot of tools and resources to help people in their journey. But I think it's very much about how that team sort of works together.
How much time are you guys at Google putting into skilling up your managers on all that information you've discovered?
Yeah, so we pretty much published all this out to, it's published externally, but also was rolled out across the organisation. And so there's pretty much like a whole toolkit that can be used with anyone within the organisation. And we encourage teams to go through an exercise, which is like a survey or a diagnostic around those 5 key areas, and then sit down as a team and sort of work through that. And then we've got a whole number of resources that are pretty much self-service, but then you can also, of course, work with someone in HR or in our learning and development team. But if a particular area is low for that team, like psychological safety, that we have a whole lot of resources on how you can actually build that up within your team. And that's been really, really effective for us.
So Carolyn, ANZ, very big organisation.
Yep.
It's been around a long time.
Yep.
It's got very established ways of doing things.
Yeah.
What's your view on this?
The way I've looked at it is, I've been leading this team for the last 3 years, and right from the outset when I came into the team, I've focused on this notion of evolution and have really put a lot of effort into the communications and preparing people for a very fast and rapidly evolving workplace, as well as work practice in the practice of marketing. And I think the key to that is actually around mindset, and increasingly so. So our focus over the last little bit actually has been around trying to cultivate a growth mindset in our team. So to be open to change, to in fact embrace change and look at it as a learning opportunity and a growing opportunity, as opposed to a more fixed mindset of a fearful opportunity. I think the other thing, and I was actually inspired by Steve Brennan, who is the CMO at eBay, and I heard him speak last year. He was named number 3 CMO in Australia. And he talked about how he took the entire year's training and development and invested that into mindfulness training for all of his marketers. And I thought that I was really inspired by that. And he called out that even in a more modern company like eBay, like Google, he was taken aback at the low-level state of anxiety that people had about what was happening, in the world, as I said, sometimes within the company, and certainly within the practice of marketing and media more broadly. So we've done the same. So just take a great idea, and this year I've been doing that, and we've led mindfulness training through all our people in the marketing team, and the feedback has been terrific, really terrific. So now if someone's missing, they might be just off meditating for 5 or 10 minutes, which is kind of cool. And then I think the other thing, which I'm sure we'll touch on more, is, and Ben, you mentioned it too, it's about diversity and having lots of different skill sets that are required, much more so than certainly the decades ago when I started out in marketing. Over the time, I had a person leading our analytical marketing team who had a PhD in neuroscience, had never worked in marketing before. But he was able to bring a completely different perspective and skill set to the table. So it's getting that mix right, and certainly getting people who have the skills that I don't have.
So let's move on, and Ben, let's build on the conversation that you started on in your session this morning. So for those that saw Ben's talk this morning, you talked about this notion of left and right brain thinkers and the skill sets. And can you share what you guys are doing at Karmarama to bring those two, which can be seen as competing, and particularly like from a creative perspective, where in agencies, creatives have been the kings. They're the guys that come up with the ideas. The ideas are what drive change and growth for clients. Data can be seen as a threat. How have you overcome that? So data is seen as an opportunity and a springboard.
I think, as I was saying this morning, when it turns into insights that can fuel better briefs for creatives suddenly get it. And when it's just a kind of retargeting tool, the consumer, I think, also feels the weakness in that approach, where you can see your name has just been inserted in a kind of generic template, and you open a website and you're seeing the same pair of shoes, whatever it is, follow you around. But when you can take the data and go, this is really interesting, people in this market are really concerned about this thing. As I was saying with the Army case study this morning, that we found out that there were lots of drivers and triggers into a recruitment conversation that even the army hadn't spotted. And that came through the data. And that led to better briefs into the creatives. I think the bit that I was referring to earlier, that it's the dangerous thing though can be just kind of merging everything together too much, because you want to have the best analytical people you can find. If you just take them into a creative culture and you hire one person to represent data, it's probably not going to work. I mean, certainly that was our experience. If you have enough of a community and a culture, and you need 15 people plus to develop a team that can really feel strong in that position, then all of a sudden they develop their own culture within the wider culture. And they're actually, ironically, more likely to be respected because they've got a bit more of that swagger from being really good and being able to hire really good people. So, it's how far you can take it, but I think agencies have to develop that way, because the old model of one guy sitting at the top doing a kind of command and control doesn't work when you have to work at speed. And that's the other really big change that we've noticed when it comes to digital marketing, dynamic content. It's an agile process that needs a more devolved operation. And you can't have the old systems signing everything off, on a Thursday evening. You have to have empowered teams who are capable and trained enough to do it themselves. And as a manager, that puts much more effort on training those people up and also giving them feedback. And I think what bigger companies possibly do have more experience, let's say, than smaller companies, is in knowing how to manage that senior talent and giving them really honest feedback. And we have, we've only got 4, not 5 principles that we talk about, but we talk about collaboration above all. We have a big sign that says, "No wankers, please," in the office.
German?
In German, yeah, because we only want to offend Germans. We talk about creativity, we talk about character, so bringing your authentic self to work, but we also talk about candor. You have to create a culture where junior people, particularly those who are kind of client-facing, can speak up, and that hasn't always been the case in agencies where it's been dominated by very strong individuals at the top.
I think that's such an important point. And what we've done in the hallways, we've gone, conflict is good, but conflict needs to be executed in the right way. Conflict, people shouting at each other, is not good, it's destructive. But healthy debate, where people, back to your psychological safety, people are comfortable to talk and spar with each other, is what needs to happen to get to the right outcome.
And conflict about the ideas, not the person.
That's right, it must not be personal. Yeah. So we've created, it's called the Zen of productive conflict. So there's things like, is swearing okay? Fuck yeah, as long as it's not at someone. That sort of thing. But John, so you guys, Match previously, Blue 449 today, it's been very digitally oriented, you've been very ahead of the curve with the technology. You guys have had more data than most other businesses even know exist. So, and you're obviously coming the other way, where you're trying to bring the ideas thinking in. How are you handling that? Because
So I think I'll just start with the cultural imperative. We have one view on our culture, and it's just a single-minded mission, which is about helping clients grow by creating work that works. So everybody works to that mantra. So when we look at data, and I would say rather than the creative guys, it's the strategist, we've got 10% of our staff as analysts. So we've invested heavily in that area because we can see what it brings and how fast it can bring to a solution. So in many ways, we see data fueling creativity, but also the strategists also fuel the analysts to find more gems to help support their proposition. So we've actually physically put our analysts sitting next to our strategists, which is a bit of an oil and water mix of incredibly different personalities, but it actually is working really well. They come up with the term, they're stratalytics, or madmen and mathmen working together. And the data is absolutely finding those little gems of wisdom that they can go into the brief that the strategist can leap from, but also the strategist is asking the analyst to dig deeper in these particular areas. So that's working really well for us, and the clients are responding positively too.
That's good.
I think, you get we know with diverse teams, like that, just interesting listening to you about bringing those two together to work together, because we know that those different perspectives lead to better outcomes, and that's all the research about diverse teams and everything that we know about with diversity now is exactly kind of what
so you just
saying.
mix it up like a cocktail and see if it works. If it didn't, we would have separated them again, but they seem to get on.
Just mix a new one.
Yeah, that's right.
No, but Google, like you guys, if there's a business that's got extremities, you've got developers and salespeople.
Yeah.
Like those are two different worlds.
Yes.
How do they coexist?
Yeah, look, they just do. I don't know.
That's not good enough. We need more detail.
They like working at Google. It's cool brand.
I think, we don't force it, but there is what brings us together, I think, is being part of an organisation that everyone cares about. And you talked about your kind of overarching mission, and we've got a mission that's been in place since we founded Google, which I think has been something that's really held the organisation together, and everyone knows that they're part of that bigger picture. So they all have a role, and they're all equally as important to align to achieve what we want to achieve, which is around that mission. And so I think kind of what I was saying before as well is when you do get all different perspectives together, you produce really great stuff. And I see it all the time in meetings where we do have those from tech and sales, and it is really different, but they are equally as important, and we absolutely want and need those different perspectives in the room. So it works.
There's some clear themes coming through. This sense of mission.
Yep.
All of you have talked about behaviours, respect being critical, creating that safe environment. Speed was touched on earlier. And we all know we're all under pressure to be better, faster, and cheaper. But speed, what are you guys doing? John, what are you doing at Blue 449 to move faster?
Well, I think we're really lucky because as a startup business, which Match was, and an entrepreneurial business, which now Blue 449 is kind of in our DNA. You have to be. I think about the word agile, which is going to be a big topic for you guys. I think for me, it's been a state of mind. We've just cut out the layers. We've moved very quickly to get to a solution and become iterative if that idea is not good enough and build on it. And so I think we've been agile without having had the label of agile. And what we also have is a collective of different clients that some have actually very geared to the agile process. What we don't do is train our whole agency on being agile. What we do is train the account teams to understand what that client's going through in its process, whether it's sprinting, scrumming, or whatever it might be, pulsing, so they know what the dialogue is that's required at every step of the way. And we're getting some fantastic results from that as well. So, I think the other thing is that data fuels agility.
Yes.
We've got so many clients that have a 1-week sprint, or their whole business turns upside down in 24 hours. In the old days, you'd be scratching your head trying to work out what on earth is a silver bullet that's going to solve the problem. But actually, the answer's in the analytics. And you can move very quickly, and that becomes the business tool to move as quickly with the client. So it's a combination of state of mind and powered by or fueled by data from our perspective.
It's interesting, that, isn't it? That speed of knowing what's working, which is what the data is doing for us. Enabling us to see very quickly what's landed, what hasn't, and how we can pivot. Carolyn, you'd be remiss not to bring you in at this point.
Agile. We're not in that same position, and we're certainly a long way off from being a startup. We have 180 years of being a very established, traditional conservative company. It's been a really incredible 12 months for ANZ. In that we had a new CEO start at the start of last year, or step into the chair at the start of last year, and the decision was made to bring Apple Pay to Australia. And to do that, we had an amazing task, which, I think many would have said we probably weren't going to be able to pull this off. We had 10 weeks to go from literally briefing a team who knew nothing about the mission they had ahead of them, to 10 weeks to be in market, an 8-figure budget, and to do this all under wraps, very, very, very tight wraps. And we did that by selecting a very cross-functional group of people, and it did involve, product and technology as much as a very heavy dose of marketing to lead this initiative into market. We had 4 different agency partners in the room with us, and it really forced us to actually adopt probably a lot of what all 3 of the people sitting here, 4 actually, have brought into their own companies right from the outset. We cut the bureaucracy, empowered decision making, put away the PowerPoint, and as I said, used our agency partners as actually just part of the team. And it was a great learning, and I think it gave us the organisational confidence to do what now has been put on the record. ANZ is on the record that they're going to turn their entire Australian business into a scaled agile operation. So accepting the frontline branch teams, who actually, quite frankly, probably already operate more in that way as a cohesive, empowered team. But it's an enormous task, and I think the experience we had in bringing Apple Pay and the learnings to market has given us, as I said, the confidence to do it. So that's the planning and design of that work is underway. I was joking with someone before, the design team for the Agile transformation is being agile and doing it in an agile way, but they're being very transparent about we don't have all the answers for how this design's going to look. There's been questions raised, really good questions, like, and even in my own team, I have about 76% female team of about 120 people. We have an enormous amount of flexible working hours, work from home, work part-time. How does that work in Agile? How does that work as a cohesive squad? We've got lots of things to work through, but I think it's it's going to make us a very different company, and I think will actually help us. When I talked before about the talent war, I think it'll help us attract people who want to work in the banking and finance sector in that way.
We probably should open this up to the floor at this point. Has anyone got any burning questions they want to throw in the direction of the panel? We've got one just here. Not yet.
No.
Sorry. Thank you. It's been very interesting. Just on that point around Agile and I guess digital transformation and what we're seeing happening, my interest is in, are we then going to start to see that marketing teams should start to report into different senior executives? I found it interesting that Gary Briggs yesterday mentioned that he reports into the COO and the CPO, so Chief Product Officer. I'd like to get views on that, around how that might be changing.
Should probably go back to you first.
I'm happy to kick it off, but I'm sure there'll be other things. I think, when I look at the way many companies have chosen to set up a scaled agile function, who you report to and who you work with can be 2 quite very different things. And the way I see this unfolding is that we will have probably the squads or the teams that are working in these agile ways will be the cross-functional teams. There will be a team leader or mission leader, whatever. There's lots of all this wonderful language around that. That in day-to-day helps guide the team. But in terms of then who they report to, I think disciplines such as marketing are likely to still remain a cohort, but not. I introduced myself at the start here saying I lead a fully centralised team. I won't be sitting here next year saying that to you. I feel very confident about that. But myself or somebody else will be leading, I would say, the professional practice of marketing at ANZ. But the way they work will be actually a team on that aligned mission. That's sort of how I see it working.
On this point of speed, and if we move beyond the attitude and the mentality we need, what about, are there any tools that any of you are using that have taken some of the manual effort out of marketing, enabling you to be moving quicker?
I'll jump in there, and it might actually relate to the reporting. I think it's less to do who reports to who, but who actually talks to who in the Marcom's business. We've got one client where our first appointment was to work with the web dev team, And they had an amazing tool called Jira, which is an Atlassian software tool to go through like a mega whip, but it's very dynamic. We then got appointed to the broader Marcoms team, and we realised that the Marcoms team weren't talking to the web dev team, but working on projects with a static whip sheet. And we said, well, why don't you use this Jira tool? Which they did, and finally, they're now meshing the tools together. We've got this organic work in progress, which we can actually prioritise all the jobs, and they're working much more seamlessly, much more swiftly. So it's more about having a conversation, but funnily enough, a tool made it work.
And is that enabling you to get away from having the somewhat what can be the slightly tedious whip meeting running through?
It's iterative.
You
They just pull a ticket, and everybody
Yep.
knows that's what we've got to do in the next 24 hours and move through it as a team.
Great.
We've noticed one. It's not very sexy or technological, but it's putting stuff up on walls, right?
Yeah.
So
It's so true though.
it's funny because we bought a mobile development agency, and it was like having another species arrive into the office. You know, they would have stand-up meetings every morning. They would talk about what they achieved the day before. They would put all the work up on the walls. Anyone could contribute to the conversation. And you could just see, you know, the ad people looking at it going, God, that's weird. And actually the encouraging thing was the junior creatives saw it as a good thing, because they were kind of going, God, they get to do stuff every day. You know, if we're lucky, we get one ad out every 6 months. And we started saying, well, why don't we put our stuff up on the wall? Why don't we put the brief up on the wall and kind of the early thinking around it, and let people contribute to it and see what's happening. So it's kind of just being open, really. And it completely transformed how teams got behind kind of client problems and work. So everyone's got walls. I'd start with that if you can't afford the tech.
What about Google on that front?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting talking about sort of the agile methodology, and it sounds that's quite similar to what the mobile app team seems to have been doing, and because it was born out of, you know, software development. But I think we don't use agile methodology in other parts of Google, but I think we've got a few things in place that just naturally mean we work quite well and quite quickly. So we've got a very collaborative culture, and I think that's enabled by our collaborative workspaces and our technology. If anyone has been to a Google office, you see that, you know, and a lot of offices are actually investing a lot in their workspaces now, but to facilitate that kind of collaborative discussion and just way of working day to day, and it might be walls and just, you know, not petitions and not offices, and really open floor and really collaborative spaces. But then we've got the technologies as well, which means that you can actually meet with anyone anytime, and you can get things done really quickly. And we've got our collaborative docs, so you know, being able to just work together it's just amazing.
Not on them, get onto the G Suite. Change your life.
It really is. I mean, yeah. When I started at Google, I'd been, you know, on Office the whole time, and I was like, how does this work, you know? And are you writing? Like, you're writing as I'm writing. Like, how does that happen? It's just such a weird concept, but it's it really does mean that you can work through things really quickly. And I mean, we've also got we don't have we've got a really flat structure, so we don't have much hierarchy, and we've been that way since the beginning. So we have worked in sort of small teams, and it's all about, you know, not about, we don't just sort of have titles, and it's not about the seniority and approval processes, but we recognise that ideas can come from anywhere. So people just jump on projects, and we have these core principles around sort of, you know, be scrappy and launch and iterate, and you know, fail fast and fail forward, and innovate, and 10x thinking we talk about. So there's a lot of core principles that I think have been with us for a while that's just helped us be quite quick in how we get things done, and quite agile.
Ambiguity was a word.
Yes.
That we've heard a lot over at Google.
Yeah. Lots
Not
of
agile, ambiguity. Be comfortable with ambiguity. Have we got any more questions from anyone in the audience? No more questions? Oh, one right at the back. There we go, the microphone coming.
Kieran from Owens, I was right at the front. I had to step out for 2 minutes, so apologise if you just covered this and I missed it. One for the agencies, I guess. how are you evolving the role of the suit? So, particularly in a media agency, it was relatively simple for an account guy or girl to know outdoor TV, radio, relatively simple ideas. How are you evolving that when the account person could potentially need to understand analytics, data, search, VR, from what Ben was talking about this morning? How are you skilling those people up?
I've got a very quick example. We've just flipped it. We've got a guy who works for us. I won't say his name because clearly from an agency you want to pinch him. But he was actually a deep vertical person who knew lots about tech, lots about business. Adobe was his platform. We actually got a client on board who works off that platform, again, similar style, response-based business. And he actually came to us as a management team and said, look, you've got all these suits exactly as you described. They don't understand what I do, and the client's getting confused. Can I take more of a holistic management view and actually become the client lead? And to do that, we just had to take the client on the journey. So it's almost an experiment, but it seems to be working really well. So that's how we've taken on the challenge, just being flexible.
Yeah, I think that, from our perspective, T-shaped is a horrible phrase, but I think having at least one expertise, and we're lucky in the sense that we talk about being good at three things, engagement, data-driven content, mobile experiences. But we'll take the best people out of each of those disciplines and then teach them about the other things. They don't have to be experts, they just have to know who to bring in. And I think it's quite an exciting time again to be a suit in this business, because I think if you're just a kind of handmaiden to a process, you're not going to attract the best sort of talent. But if you're an orchestrator or conductor whose job it is to bring in the right people at the right time, that's a much more exciting role, and it's more likely to provide value to a client. So I can see us kind of upskilling that department in our industry again, because I think we've lost quite a lot of good people over the years. To clients, funnily enough.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
I was just going to add one thing, that if I think across the agency partners that we work with, and indeed the intro mentioned about some of the major consulting firms, I'm seeing all of them actually evolve their model to be less dedicated suits onto one particular account, and more about, okay, the task at hand and the pool of resources who's going to form to, there still needs to obviously be some form of engagement management, but it's more about then who's the right team to partner with us to deliver whatever that thing is. And I think actually probably the consulting firms have actually, that's always been their way of engaging, and I'm seeing that play back out the other way through agencies.
I remember that was, again, harking back to my days in the world of Accenture. They talked about hiring people not for their skill. You can learn a discipline, but you need people that can build relationships and be good at interfacing with other people.
Yep.
And you teach them the hard skills. Yep. And it's a very logical way to go. I'm getting the nod from Dean that we need to wrap up. The outtakes I've got from this may not align with yours, but just a few thoughts that I've heard this morning from the guys. The importance of mission. Having that mission that the team knows they're heading on. An environment where you've got the level of respect and trust. Respect and trust where people can speak and they can spar and they can debate and discuss confidently. And I love the notion of agile as a state of mind versus a straight process. And really, what is it? It's about moving fast, collaborating efficiently. Do that right, we get the speed that we need, we get the efficiencies, and we'll get the great work that deliver those outcomes and drive that growth that marketing is uniquely capable of delivering. So thank you to the panelists, thank you for the time, and thank you to all of you for joining us this morning.